This video is just going to give you some ideas of how you can use data that is found on the internet or in articles to help students problem solve and let them come up with choices on what are of interest to them. This is some information on Labor Day, and that's because this is the beginning of a school year and students have just started school and are going to get Labor Day off, or they haven't started school because it always starts after Labor Day. So Labor Day is a very relevant holiday or day to students, and oftentimes they don't really even understand what it's from. So this activity is really very open, free form. It provides some data that was taken from some articles, and the results in this data are based on a survey that was conducted with 3,000 Americans. And there's links in here to the actual article with more information if students want to explore that. But the idea is, here's some information. So you'll notice there's 3 different things. So there's some numbers here that talk about, the median household income, laborers, how many people are laborers in the workforce at the time. And then there are some graphs. This one is showing what Americans do on Labor Day based on, again, on those 3,000 Americans that were surveyed. And so students could say, what does this actually mean? How many people is that? How could we figure that out? And over here is an image of what people are eating based on, the survey again. So then maybe students would be interested in figuring out how many of those 3,000 are eating burgers or eating barbecue chicken. And if that's 3,000, how many would that mean if we extrapolate to the entire United States? What might that mean? So lots of ways they could explore things. They might have to do some research if they pick something from this initial Labor Day by the numbers. So the idea is to give students this, and this is a great first week, couple weeks activity because it allows you to see what students know, what they're interested in, also what mathematics they know, because they're going to tend to use prior knowledge to focus on something that is of interest to them. So you kind of get a good sense of your students, and it also allows you to work with some problem-solving strategies, collaboration, having them work together, having them share and discuss and justify, those types of things. So I wanted to just give you one possible example of what a student might do and how it's pulling in some of that prior knowledge. This is clearly just one possible example. So if I were a student and I'm looking at this, Classpad.net allows you to pretty much go wherever you want. I could make a table, I could make a graph, I could write words, I could do some geometry. So if I'm a student and I'm looking at this graph right here is appealing to me. So if I've surveyed 3,000 Americans and this is what they're eating, how many is that? How many are eating burgers? How many are eating chicken? Barbecued chicken or ribs, right? So can we figure that out? Can we extrapolate? So I would focus on this. And so notice in this activity, they get to pick what they want, but they do have to explain what are you going to explore and why did you choose that? And now let's see your exploration. If this were me, I might take this sticky that has this image in it. And this is the nice thing about Classpad, you can move things around, and I might want to make it bigger so that I can see it better, right? So I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger so that I can really focus in on it. And if I'm a student, my prior knowledge might be this looks like half a circle to me. So could I use things I know about circles to help me figure out more about this information? And so I'm going to actually maybe try to find the angle degrees that each one of these is. It's a half circle. Can I find out the angles and how will that help me figure out a percentage of the 3,000? So that might be where I go. And I'm just going to start this. So one thing I like to do, I'm going to turn off the labeling here. Okay. And I want to make the arc here. So what I need to do, I don't know where this point came from. So let's just delete that particular point. So I want to do a segment. I want to make that diameter. So I'm going to use a segment tool to make a diameter that goes from one edge of this half circle to the other. And then I'm going to construct the midpoint because that to me is where the center is, right? So we're going to construct a midpoint. And now I'm going to use this to basically first make the arc itself. And so I have an arc tool here that I could use, and the arc tool does require a center. So I'm going to use this as my center. I'm going to go out to the edge and then, set it. And then notice my arc can go all the way to the next endpoint of that diameter. And now I have my arc. Now I'm going to go back to my segment tool and make some radii that go through those edges of each category, right? So basically I am creating angles, and these angles, which are part of the 180 degrees that a half circle measures, right? So this is 180 degrees because it's half a circle. I can now use that to measure the angles and use that to figure out percentages. So if I were a teacher and I'm watching a student do this, I already know that they understand circles. I understand what a half circle measures. They understand the measure of a circle as a whole, 360, 180, and how to convert proportions. So the percentage of each angle to 180 now becomes a proportion, and then I can convert that to percent. So lots of things that are going on. So let me just show you an example. So let's measure this one angle right here that represents burgers. So I measure it, and it tells me that it measures 54.45 degrees. How can I use that to figure out how many of those 3,000 Americans are eating hamburgers? Well, I'm going to get my calculate tool out, and I'm going to do 54.45, that angle measure, out of the 180 that the whole semicircle is. And that gives me my fraction form, but I'm going to change it to decimal. So that's about, if I were to convert that to a percentage, about 30% of those of those Americans. So 3,000 times that 30%, is going to give me about 907. So there's 907 of the surveyed people that are, or if I'm going to round, maybe I want a whole person. I can't have a half person. So things like that they could talk about. So 907, 908 of the 3,000 are eating hamburgers. That's a fairly huge amount. So why is that? And then if we extrapolate, what would that mean if America, if we got the total population and we did it from there? So lots of different ways they could explore, but I'm using geometry, I'm using algebraic reasoning, I'm using calculations. Just one avenue students might choose to explore. So this is just a fun activity because it could go in so many different directions, and if students are working together, they can be searching things up on Google and finding some numbers and, really making connections to where did these numbers or these graphs come from and what do they actually mean.